Over the last 10 years, Hollywood has clearly figured out how to make big-screen superheroes work, putting together incredibly successful adaptations of characters and worlds that comic fans love. Before that, though, well, let's just call it trial and error. The path to the MCU is littered with strange efforts that have gone mostly forgotten since they were originally released. Here are the bizarre Marvel TV shows you've probably never seen. Generation X, 1996. In an era when the X-Men franchise has a sprawling series of movies and TV hits like The Gifted and Legion, it's hard to believe that there was a time in which Marvel's mutants weren't a sure thing. In the 90s, the core team was thriving in comics and ruling Saturday mornings with a long-running animated series, and a spin-off called Generation X featured a younger cast of heroes still learning the ropes. In a time before Buffy the Vampire Slayer hit airwaves with a supernatural spin on a similar idea, Generation X sounds like the perfect way to bring Marvel's edgy 90s teen drama to television. It wasn't. Filmed as a pilot and aired as a TV movie, Generation X is a hallucinogenic nightmare, and not the good kind. The production value is insanely low, the acting is lousy, and somehow it doesn't even manage to be entertainingly bad. Instead, it's mostly just a reminder of how lucky we are to have better stuff today. Silver Surfer, 1998. In the 90s, Marvel had huge success with cartoons like X-Men and Spider-Man, but there were plenty of other attempts at an animated Marvel universe that ended after a single season. 1998's Silver Surfer animated series, however, could have been remembered as one of the best. The Surfer is an inherently weird character, a cosmic sentinel whose stories are often rife with themes of existentialism and philosophical struggle. Rather than tone it down for the show and turn it into a simple beat-em-up about good guys and bad guys, the animators leaned into it with episodes about imperialism, slavery, and nihilism. It also incorporated some of the strangest characters the cosmic side of the Marvel Universe has to offer, including Gamora, Uatu the Watcher, Eternity, and even Thanos. The art style was interesting too, with imperfect but charming CGI that looks like it's ripped straight from the pages of a Jack Kirby comic. Unfortunately, a legal dispute between Marvel and Saban, the production company, led to the show's cancellation after a single season. It's a shame too. While it was one of the strangest Marvel shows of all time, it was also one of the most interesting. The Avengers, United They Stand, 1999. Looking back from a time when they're in the most popular movies ever made, it's hard to imagine a show about the Avengers being so unpopular that it was canceled after a single season. If you've ever seen Avengers United They Stand, however, you'll understand exactly why it got the axe. Rather than including popular heavy hitters like Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, the show was populated by heroes that were B-listers at best. We're not knocking great characters like Hawkeye and the Falcon, but Tigra and the Swordsman aren't exactly the biggest names Marvel had to offer. On the other hand, topping that team off with a genuine stinker of a character in Wonder Man is a recipe for disaster, and giving everyone clunky toyetic designs rather than their iconic comic book costumes wasn't a help either. Yikes. Blade the Series, 2006. Let's give credit where it's due. Blade effectively kickstarted the modern superhero movie, and Blade 2 still holds up as one of the best the genre has to offer. We'll admit that Blade Trinity might be an imperfect conclusion to the trilogy, but overall, Blade rules. With that in mind, it's no surprise that in 2006, Spike TV began developing a series continuing the adventures of the legendary Daywalker. Unfortunately, the show lacked the budget, production values, and star power of the big screen version. Wesley Snipes was absent, replaced by Sticky Fingers of the rap group Onyx, and none of the other actors in the films appeared in the series either. It never quite felt like the Blade of the movies, and ran for one very strange season before it ultimately got staked through the heart after 13 episodes. Supaidaman, 1978 to 1979. There's an undeniable charm to Japanese tokusatsu shows. The genre has a long tradition in Japan of colorful costumed heroes fighting grotesque monsters and giant robots, and America has been importing it for decades now in the form of the long-running Power Rangers franchise. All the more interesting, though, is the time the reverse happened and Japan brought an American hero to a tokusatsu show. As part of a licensing agreement, Toei, the leading producer of tokusatsu in Japan, made a show loosely based on Spider-Man in the late 70s. Often transliterated as Supaidaman to distinguish it from the original, Japan's take resembles its source material in name and costume only. Instead of Peter Parker, this Spidey is Takuya Yamashiro, a daring motorcycle racer who got his powers from the blood of a dying alien from planet Spider. He's tasked with fighting a sinister interstellar force called the Iron Cross Army, led by the evil Professor Monster. Oh, and Spidey's got a giant robot called Leopardon. Supaidaman is all kinds of awesome if you're into tokusatsu, and also super weird thanks to scenes where Supaidaman introduces himself as an emissary from hell or shoots at people with a machine gun. But he also has a place in toku history. He was the first live action to introduce a hero summoning a giant robot, which would become a mainstay in Super Sentai and Power Rangers afterward. Nightman, 1997 to 1999. The Ultraverse line is a pretty odd slice of 90s comics. These original superhero comics were published by a company called Malibu, which was acquired by Marvel in 1994, but not before a few of their heroes had been optioned for mass media. Along with the short-lived animated series about a team called Ultra Force that was half satire and half rip-off of the far more successful X-Men. The major result was Nightman, which ranks among the most peculiar superhero shows of all time. The series focuses on a buff jazz saxophonist who develops the telepathic ability to detect evil after being struck by lightning, at the cost of never being able to sleep. With 8 hours of his day freed up, he creates a supersuit and starts fighting crime. At night. That last part is probably obvious. It's a stretch of a premise to begin with, and coupling it with laughable production values makes for a pretty freakish show. Somehow, it managed to last for 2 seasons and reeled in guest stars like Jerry Springer and Donald Trump. A slice of pure 90s weirdness, Nightman is mostly forgotten, but give the opening credits one watch and we'll promise it's all you're going to think about for a week. Mutant X, 2001 to 2004. Mutant X is the product of poor circumstance. To make a long story short, Marvel sold the film and TV rights for the X-Men to 20th Century Fox. Years later, Marvel Studios producer Avi Arad pushed Mutant X into production and was promptly sued by Fox for violating their agreement by putting X-Men characters in a TV show Fox didn't produce, which was a pretty big deal after the success of the first X-Men movie. Because of this, changes were applied to distance Mutant X from its source material, resulting in a genuinely bizarre show that's not quite an X-Men show, but not quite not. The show is about a group of mutants who gained their powers through a government experiment. The show follows them while they're on the run and being kept safe by one of the scientists that helped create them. The characters were unrelated to the X-Men, none of them were allowed to have superheroic codenames, and the only real resemblance to the real X-Men is the presence of mutants, and the team's mission is to find other mutants and help keep them safe. Despite its general weirdness, the show ran for 3 seasons before its production company folded.